Thank you for the opportunity to be with you guys today, and just listening in on the conversations that have been taking place. What it shows to me is that there's a great deal of compassion, passion, and commitment that exists, and I think it's that we need to harness. Although my talk is, centered around lived experience, for me, it's about working in partnership with whoever we need to. We need to work with hearts and minds of professionals, of policymakers, of funders, as well as individuals who have been directly affected. So a little bit about my background without going into a huge amount of detail. My lived experience, like all of us, began the day I was born. And, for, the best part of, nearly 30 years, my life went down a path that I wasn't sure if I'd make it back from. And then the term that I use is, in 2007, I activated my lived experience. And what does that mean? That means that I reflected upon my life experiences, compared it to those of, of people around me, peers, communities, and thought, is there something that I've learned throughout my life that I can share with others? And that's led to things that I would never have dreamed would have happened. But since that day, it's been, for me as an individual, about growth, development. I should have put reflection in there, and influence. I see the role of lived experience as being that conduit between two systems, between two communities, between professionals and community members, or it could be between other parts of the system. And I'll mention the system a few times, because I think that, for me, that's a much easier way of analysing the world around us. But, for those people that have had direct lived experience, the knowledge that's gained through that is, it's pivotal in being able to bring about positive change. So I sat back and I thought, okay, over the last 13 years, well, what have I learned? What can I share with other people, perhaps who are thinking about their own lived experience, or who are on that lived experience journey themselves? And I think the first thing I wanted to say, that, and it's been mentioned in the talk just before, it's about self-development. We have to be self-aware of the situation that we're in, of our level of understanding, and be driven to want to be able to learn, to be driven to want to be able to have an increased level of knowledge, understanding. So I mentioned the system already, but I think it's really important that, as the colleague from probation said, this is not about individuals. Now, there might be some really good individuals that are working within the system. There might be some that are not so good. But if we look at it at a system level, it's from that place, really, we can start analysing how we can bring about those differences and where lived experience can add value. And it just made me think very quickly that, when somebody said there's, probation officers that are good and some are not so good. Listen, this is the world in which we live. I've got people that run corner shops around the corner from where I live that would be fantastic social workers, but they're not. They run a shop. I've got social workers that perhaps would be better at running shops, but this is the world in which we live, and we have to work with the system around us. One key aspect, and something that I always encourage people to do, is, if you've got that lived experience, perhaps you're, operating within an organisation, for example, that's innovative, like Mary Claire said, then how do we then take that learning and influence change? And for me, that's at a strategic level. The word strategy, I didn't really understand what it meant when I activated my lived experience, but what I did know is that I was willing to understand and learn from others. And another key element for me in terms of kind of lived experience, particularly leadership, is about how you consistently spread that message. So when I think back to when I was running an organisation, I would have the same conversation with somebody that's come out of prison as I would with a professional that's come to find out what we do, as I would with another person perhaps from another walk of life, because it was clear in my mind in terms of what that long-term vision was. And as I picked up learning going along the way, I would disseminate it, freely, with as many people that I could come into contact with. One word of caution around lived experience is that obviously lived experience is our own personal experience. But if you've got a mindset that's willing to learn, if you've got a mindset that's willing to take on alternative views, and there might be views that you don't agree with, there might be views that you vehemently oppose, but for me, that is part of the learning. By doing that and having that open mind and being diplomatic, about how we, take on as well as give information, then that journey of learning will just continue. Now, of course, there are allies. I can tell from this virtual space that there are allies within the room, but let's look above and beyond our system in terms of allies. Let's look to different parts of society, to people who have the right kind of similar thinking in terms of what needs to change. And I mentioned the long-term goal, and that long-term goal might change over time. That long-term goal may change when a new level of information is imparted upon us. But let's not forget about those incremental wins. So I was very blessed I've been really blessed throughout my life, and one of the greatest blessings was listening to Jesse Jackson talk. And I mention this all the time when I speak, but one of the things he said in terms of his reflection of the civil rights movement, he said learning and literacy are the key to liberation. He said it 2 or 3 times, and I sat there and I thought, you know what? This man is so true. And that we could apply that to people affected by addiction. We could apply that to people that are going through the criminal justice system. At the very least, we should be looking at the wins, as we put them, that will enhance the human experience. It goes without saying, but we need to positively influence every opportunity, whether we're standing in a queue at Sainsbury's, whether we're, chatting to a homeless person at the train station. Let's take the gift that we've been given and spread it as widely as we can do. But one word of caution: anyone embarking upon this journey will have to have resilience as one of their key and core values, because the system will not necessarily welcome us into all the places that we need to be. People within the system will intentionally keep us out from certain doors because, it could potentially be seen as a threat to their professionalism. But what my point of view is that lived experience and professional experience or expertise can work in harmony, but we need to nurture the space in order for that to happen. So for me, it's about a journey, not a destination. And some of the ways in which that's practically come about in my life. So the peer-led organisation that I joined initially as a volunteer and went on to develop, within 6 years was awarded the Queen's Award for voluntary service. And that was not just an accolade for us in Wolverhampton and my volunteers, all of whom had lived experience, but that person who was walking through our door, who perhaps was contemplating suicide, or somebody else that just didn't see how they fitted within the world, that was for them, and it still is for them. We were twice cited as a European model of best practice, and I think Samir put it in the chat, but I think one of the reasons for that is because as a leader, I ensured that humility was one of our core values, that we did not see ourselves better or worse than anyone else. And by doing that, the outcomes that we were achieving meant that, people's lives were being improved, as well as, bringing about change. Again, sorry to go back to you again, Samir, but you mentioned humility. I gave a TEDx talk last year, and one of the things that I mentioned in there, I said, the ability to connect on a human level can unearth nuggets of gold that can be used to shape and advance the human experience. And I firmly believe that. You don't have to be the most educated person. You don't have to be the most knowledgeable person in the room. But by understanding that there's another human being that you can connect with, and hopefully bring about some sort of positive trajectory, we can do that with everybody. We don't have to wait. So some of the stuff I'm up to at the moment. So I'm involved in Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Probation around drug treatment and recovery in probation in England and Wales. I've just finished working with Dame Carol Black on part 2 of a review of drugs. And one of the areas that I didn't really kind of connect with all that much in my early career was around NHS. I just thought it was a big beast over there that did whatever it did. But if we're talking about, person-centered, moving, improving outcomes, we don't have to look any further than like our NHS system, because the health inequalities that exist are absolutely atrocious. And then factor into that, the criminal justice system, factor into that ethnicity, factor into that poverty, factor into that deprivation. These are all the things that, that drive some of these inequalities. So for me to be given an opportunity to influence some of that is just a dream come true. Because as we speak and as we're here in this room, there are people that are suffering. There are communities that are grieving for all sorts of reasons. So we have to do whatever we can do to try and meet them where they are and bring them forward. And the other program that's not been announced yet, but I'll be doing my third program with Operation Black Vote with Lord Simon Woolley, which is called Pathways to Success, in conjunction with Lloyds Banking Group, House of Commons, and the University of Oxford. So you remember I said about that self-development thing? You know, that wasn't just in the early days. I'm still doing it now. I'm practicing it all the time. I'm looking for opportunities to better myself, to build my networks. And I know I only had 10 minutes, so I'm going to leave it there. But just to say congratulations for A, putting this event on, for B, building the network, and for everyone that's involved, regardless of your personal or professional background. You know, we need to support each other to help move things forward. And by doing that, then we're giving, you know, as many people as possible the best opportunity at living a life with meaning, purpose, and achieving their potential and ambition. Feel free to check out my website. Feel free to drop me an email. This was really quick. I didn't get to go into a lot of detail, but also, yeah, follow me on the usual social media channels. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sonny. Yeah, always love to hear you speak. I think the first time we met was at the Insight Awards last year. And one of the things I think that jumped out for me was the part where you were speaking about you must have resilience, because you're going to get a lot of doors slamming in your face, you're going to get a lot of rejection. And it made me think of my friend who works in the system. He's got a senior role in the system, in the prisons. And he applied, I think it was 23 times to work in the prisons, but because he had lived experience, he kept getting a knockback. And imagine applying for a job 23 times. That's some resilience. Eventually he got it, and now he's got a happy career working within the system. But he's very innovative and uses his lived experience to engage. But yeah, that resilience thing I think that's one thing that we've got in Oodles, isn't it? It's that knowing that anything that work throws at you is never going to be as bad as kind of what you've experienced in your personal life.